All right. Welcome to the Pro Football Doc podcast. Very special podcast this week. The second half, we will continue our What Happened Here. We've got a good video. We'll talk about Urban Meyer and I guess from the medical perspective, the transition and perhaps how the pandemic is still affecting the off season, talk about a few other things. But I'm excited to have this guest on. We've corresponded some, but we don't really know each other. We just through Twitter friends and what have you. I respect his work immensely. And quite honestly, I wanted to have him on because I'm curious about him and what he does and how he does it. I've loved the exchange of ideas that we've had, but no script, nothing. Essentially, this podcast is going to be an eavesdrop of a really introductory conversation between myself and Mike Renner. Mike is the lead draft analyst at Pro Football Focus, right?
Yep.
And I appreciate your stuff and your insight and how we've talked. And I've been looking for this chance to just have a discussion with you. So welcome to the Pro Football Doc podcast.
No, it's an honor to come on. I've been following you years, it seems, to use your predictive. I see an injury happen on TV. First thing I do is log on to see your Twitter, your opinion on it. Cause I think I was telling you before, my dad was an orthopedic surgeon growing up, and talking about the injuries was always a very interesting part of the game to me, and kind of that diagnosis and then prognosis part of it has always been something that I'm interested in. So I've, like I said, been following you closely as well.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate that. And thank you for coming on here. So how did you, I would imagine there's people, how did you become the lead draft analyst of Pro Football Focus? There's no script for this, right? I'm interested in hearing your story and how this happened and how you got into this.
Well, so my birthday was April 27th, which is always around draft time. So I like to say I was born to do this. But no, growing up, I loved the draft. I would, for my birthday, I would get a draft guide or multiple draft guides actually as I got older every year. And I would pour through it, try to figure out, I'm from Milwaukee originally, try to figure out who the Packers were going to pick. Never really ended up figuring it out, but I still can't figure it out. But it kind of grew my love for the game. I didn't go to a high school that even had a football program, so I never got to really scratch that itch. And so I was at Notre Dame. I was an accounting major and kind of just knew I didn't want to do accounting. And so I saw that PFF was hiring. It was low level, pretty awful job, to be honest, starting out. I got the job, and then I've worked my way up since then. And this is, I became the draft guy 3 years ago now, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
How long have you been at Pro Football Focus?
Started in 2012. So it'll be 9 years this August. So about 8.5 years now.
So you're someone who, went to school, then figured out that's not what I really want to do, found your passion job and worked your way up. Now you're one of the main guys.
Oh yeah. I would have hated my life if I stuck in accounting. I hated it back then. I hated just studying it. I got bad grades because of it. So I found something that I could actually work hard at and that, put my skills to use, hopefully.
Oh, cool. Very, very good. So since you mentioned you're a Packers fan, do you have a
I did growing up. I don't have one now at my place. I don't know where one is, but maybe at my parents' place, it might still be there.
I see a couple of the Packers jersey in the background.
Rodgers over there on the wall. Actually, the founder, Neil Hornsby, gave that to me after last year's draft, actually. So.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. So tell me a little bit how you do your job with your analysis and how perhaps injuries and how you analyze injuries and how that plays the role.
Yeah. So I kind of am the blend, the intermediary between what all this data says. We have more data on these college football prospects than anyone's ever had at any point in human history. We collect everything that happens on the football field, every route they run, every, coverage responsibility, all this stuff. But we're still trying to figure out what it all means for a guy projecting from the college to the NFL, because it is so different and no one has, cracked the code yet. And so I'm the intermediary between what all that data says, what the film says, how athletic the guy is. And then, like you said, injuries off field, how that all factors in. And it's something that is a huge factor that kind of the unfortunate part is us being, outside observers don't get to actually get their medical records, get to go behind the scenes, know how their recovery is from certain injuries, because not always, not everyone recovers the same way. So we don't get necessarily that aspect, but it is something where when a guy does have, certain injuries, whether it was Tua last year, maybe Landon Dickerson this year, the Alabama center, or it's like, if you're not factoring it in, you're not doing your job as an independent draft evaluator.
Well, I haven't, scratched the surface yet on injury analysis yet for the upcoming draft class, but I have to probably get from you the list of the top 10 I have to address or something. Yeah. Maybe we'll work on that, and then I can share it with you. But you mentioned Tua, and we talked about Tua, right? DM and whatever, and it kind of went where we thought, right? I mean, yeah, it's a big deal. He's going to be ready for the season, but he's not going to play because of the pandemic. And his hip right now, I think, is kind of an afterthought for most people right now, right? I mean, it's kind of not at least not a front burner idea. And that's kind of what we said. He's going to be a top 10 pick somewhere. If he's number 1 overall before the hip injury, he's not falling out of the top 10. I mean, it's still at the top of the draft,
Yeah, and it's a kind of a dual-fold conversation there, with one being the fact that quarterbacks, like if that's any other position on the football field, I don't think teams are willing to risk it at nearly as much. And teams are not going to say, oh, the hip injury. But I do think quarterbacks themselves can, like, no one's talking about Dak's ankle anymore either. And no one really cared about that after he signed his $40 million deal. That didn't even impact the process. But then also, I do think people aren't talking about it, but I do think there's also a point where there is something to it. Like he did this past year, going from college to the NFL, suffering something that catastrophic, meant there's a mental aspect to it too, that I think maybe got overlooked as his rookie year, about how he didn't look like the guy at Alabama. Well, I don't necessarily think I'd expect him to, after going through what he went through after that injury. And then people kind of forgot about it, but like, yeah, that's still something that not always do guys come back and have the same mental makeup, and maybe takes them a while in such a physical game like football to feel comfortable with that injury like that.
No question. The mental side is huge. And obviously a lot of other things too, like the speed of the game and other things, and confidence. And, I talked on Jay Fiedler's podcast, and he was talking about how Tua seemed to do very well, except rolling out a certain direction. He had a more difficult time making throws. But your point is right about quarterback, because look, I love Alex Smith. What a great story and the whole deal. But if he plays any other position, there's no way he's playing football, period, in the discussion, right? And it should make it the Alex Smith Comeback Player of the Year award. But he wasn't anywhere close to himself and whatever. But I want to talk about someone we haven't talked about, Jalen Smith, right? When he came through the draft, and with his knee dislocation injury and the nerve, which, I guess I sort of broke some news on to indicate there was a nerve issue, but it was off his own post, which is why I said he's got that ankle foot orthosis. To remind you, when he injured his knee, I was skiing with the kids, and I got Twitter video, and I was like, ooh, that's a knee dislocation. Hope his nerve is okay, right? And as it turned out, the nerve wasn't. And right before combines, he himself posted something saying, 7 weeks, my brace is off, and I'm headed to a workout in the weight room. And indeed, his knee brace was off, but you could see the foot drop, ankle foot orthosis. And this was right before combines. And because he posted that, I thought it was fair that I would comment on it. What have your thoughts been on how he's projected and that injury? And where it's probably timely in the news right now is that the Cowboys did pick up his $7-some million option, that if you read articles, everyone's saying he's overpaid, he's overvalued now, and they should have gotten out of that contract. But maybe this is a more complete story going from draft and where he's coming here. Give me your thoughts on him.
So obviously I watched him closely, being Notre Dame guy, watched his whole career there.
Yes, that's what, and your draft analyst position. Yeah. Uh-huh.
He's different. Like it has impacted his game. I don't think in a straight line, coming downhill, explosive, I don't think that's changed much at all. But man, he was so agile and so smooth when he changed directions back in Notre Dame. That was kind of the big selling point. Like, this guy could play safety if you wanted him to. And he was 235 pounds, like just a real natural athlete. And I think that aspect of his game has gone by the wayside. He is a different player now. It's not nearly as impactful if you're a box linebacker, and really just a lot of your game isn't a straight line. A lot of your game is coming downhill. But I do think you see it when he has to stop, start, change directions. He's not the same guy. Unfortunately, he's still been a good linebacker, but I think it's why when he went from that scheme we saw, the Rod Marinelli scheme, to this past year when he's asked to do a little bit more and just has a little bit more on his plate, it just looked bad. And that's why people wanted him cut. And it's unfortunate, but yeah, I do think that has been one of those injuries that you worry about, where the actual lingering effects have changed the player themselves.
Well, there's a lot of talk that he's back and the nerve issue. And look, I think he's a great kid. I've never met him. Obviously, he's a very hard worker, and he's, as Bill Polian said, a generational talent. But so historically, when I said and saw that, I said, to me, not only was he not a first day pick, I thought he was a day 3 pick. Now, obviously, the Dallas doctor did the work and they picked him. And obviously the first year was a wash. The second year was a pseudo wash. The third year, he did better than most expected, right? But you could see his lateral movement, change of direction was there. He could hit that A gap hard and, do it very well. He could chase guys down, but changing directions in the open field wasn't his thing. And I think that's where now he's not done as well. Look, Dallas fans, I think hated me over that because I was saying this is just the truth. You're like, you're hating on this kid. No, I'm just telling you. And then when he got the big contract, like, see, you're wrong. But look, he's probably was a generational talent. And now straight line, he still probably tops. But just the overall, the injury changed the trajectory of his career. I mean, I think, and imagine if he still had that sideline to sideline and change of direction, he'd be unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, so the linebacker this year, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, coming out, people talk about him as, probably top 20 pick in the draft. Smith was a better prospect than Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He was same level of kind of athleticism, but then also about 20 or so pounds bigger. So sadly, I mean, it doesn't look anything like that guy anymore that we saw, and that it's definitely because of that injury.
Yeah, that's too bad. Well, one of the things, and it doesn't as much have to do with the draft, but one of the things I think that you guys overall at Pro Football Focus do extremely well is, with the analytics and predictive value on a, season-long basis, right? And I think the one thing that I try and do is, like, honestly, copy what you guys do. Obviously, just looking at injuries, but I call what I do micro analytics. This week, given that knee questionable, is it going to be no problem and he's going to be himself to Pro Football Focus ratings? Or this week, which routes on the route tree will be difficult for that wide receiver to run? And I call it, so what you guys do is very quantitative and big picture. And kind of what I do is very qualitative and individual. How does the hip injury affect Tua versus someone else, or this wide receiver, this ankle injury, and not grading all MCLs as the same, and week 1, week 2, or week 3 coming back off injury, what's the effect? Very qualitative and micro, where you guys are quantitative and macro, and you guys are the leaders of your field. What do you think about that? That's the way I look at.
That's actually interesting, because that's kind of how I view a lot of draft prospects. A lot of cornerbacks can get, like I said, we have these grades on these guys. A lot of cornerbacks can get high grades, but some get them via, they're playing zone coverage. Some get them via they're playing man coverage. And the one grade doesn't really tell you that. And like you're saying there, this guy has a high, or this guy's this player, this guy is this good, but he's all straight line speed, and whatever injury he has here is going to rob his straight line speed. So he's not going to be good all of a sudden. But maybe he's a guy who's all straight line speed, and it's going to rob his lateral agility. and it's not going to matter because he's a straight line speed guy. So I think we're kind of coming at it from the same lens then. And that's a lot of what I do with the injury analysis that I can get my hands on for the college game is like, how does this impact the actual player themselves? And then you obviously have the knowledge of timetables for post injury and whatnot.
Yeah, and obviously in season is where a lot of this is at, et cetera. So are you? I have to ask you: are you breaking out now into being a news breaker with your Seahawks fullback announcement?
Broke one. Nick's my friend, so I know him. I'm gonna actually see him in a couple weeks here. I'm going on a bachelor party with him. So he texted me saying he was going to resign, said he had a few offers. He's like, I'm going to stay with Seattle. I'm like, first thing I texted back, I'm like, can I break it? And he's like, all right, yeah, you can break it, but wait until I actually sign before. I don't want to get, this is worth a lot more to me than it is to you. So I don't want to get this thing pulled off the table.
Well, that's cool to say that. I saw your tweets on that. I thought it was funny and good. So this is a one-trick pony. You're not going to go into this business.
Yeah, I don't got a lot more friends in the NFL that are going to be telling me that they signed. Not yet. I don't know. We'll see if I make some more.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of times I think I know some things like injury-wise or whatever, but I'm sworn to secrecy, like HIPAA. Yeah. I can't say anything. I mean, look, I don't know if you saw last week with Drew Brees' retirement. I've never told that story of him getting injections in his shoulder and how he sort of, preserved his career. But like, I couldn't tell it until finally I texted Drew and say, can I tell it now? And he's like, okay, right? So just like you, I don't break news. I look at it this way. I'm dealing in insider knowledge, not insider information. And I think that's true for you too, right? I mean,
people aren't coming to me for news. And it's really not even a business I want to be in, to be honest. It sounds awful. Like you're on the clock 24/7, 2 cell phones. I want to, when I'm done, I want to be off,
Well, I mean, that's what I think that has been the luckiest thing that I've done falling into this. Like, I like your dad, I'm still an orthopedist. That's what I do. This isn't a prop get up, kind of deal. That's the day job that pays the bills. This quote side gig, I mean, early on, I thought about figuring this as breaking news. This is the injury he has, but I don't know it as a fact. And I don't want to be a source guy and be tied to it. I'm much better I'm just doing analysis and then hang it up. The only problem with that is like even with Tua and this weekend with LeBron, because people want me to look at other video now. I mean, that still leaks into, I still remember Tua. I was at Costco, shopping cart full of stuff for kids and what have you, when my phone's going off. I mean, what happened to Tua? And I'm looking at cell phone video saying he dislocated his hip. And the same thing this weekend, I'm looking at cell phone video on Saturday saying, LeBron, that's a high ankle sprain. So it still gets me a little bit, the after hours weird time stuff. But
it's funny, actually, the Tua one, I was at Disney World with my parents. And so my dad was there and showed him the video, and he's like, he said it was a hip dislocation too. He's
See,
like,
there you go.
He's like, that's not a good way to fall. He's like, that's how a lot of hip dislocations happen.
Well, kudos to your dad. And,
and
I'm sure your dad tells you too, like in his office, when someone comes in, oh, I hurt myself playing indoor soccer. Well, what happened? I was going this way. My knee went this way. The guy ran into me. That's the video for traumatic injuries. That's kind of how I do what I do there. All right. So I know you're busy. You got a lot of stuff going on, analysis going on. So the final question for you, small world in terms of what's going on. Mike Fleiss is one of my actually good friends. He's a huge Charger fan. And we talk football all the time. I try to get him come on the podcast, but he's like, I'm not doing that stuff anymore because it'd be fun. Tell me about The Bachelor and your experience and all that.
I never actually got to meet Mike, but
really?
it was a lot of fun. It was such a weird, it almost feels like an out of body experience looking back at it, because I mean, it is not real life. You're kind of in this house with 20 guys you just met, with every single pretty much person there you don't know. And you're kind of just thrown into a different world altogether. So looking back, it doesn't really feel like real life, but I was only there for, I think, 3 weeks total, like the whole experience. So it wasn't like
3 weeks is a long time to be in that place with it, right? That's I mean,
it was just I'm glad I did it. It didn't really, didn't obviously find love. I'm still looking for that one, but it was, I was just, I gotta say, I'll say it was like an out of body experience. It was just a weird time,
If
but I look
if
back and it was fun.
if Mike offered it to you, would you become the Bachelor?
Oh man, probably not at this point. I really, it's kind of been, it would just be, I don't think it would work out for me. I don't know. I feel like that's such a weird, I don't feel like I could be myself in that setting with like 30 people around me. I don't know if I would do it.
When you analyze your prospective dates, do you do like a draft like analysis? I'm just I'm joking. Don't.
Pros, cons. I mean, subconsciously you analyze everything a little bit like that. You give the pros and cons. So yeah, I think I do.
Well, yeah, we'll leave it at that. I will say this though, as much as we have fun, and I've said this to Mike Fleiss and others before. The reason why football is king, I mean, I've said this to a lot of guys and they don't believe me at first, but really everything's Netflix and Amazon and all this other stuff, right? The only thing people watch on network TV anymore is reality TV. Now, hear me out here. The Bachelor, yes, and The Amazing Race, but nightly news, local news, that's reality TV, a different brand of it, but it's still reality TV. But so is football. Why? Yeah. It's 300-pound men with a funny shaped leather object moving it across a white line, right? And in some ways, I mean, obviously The Bachelor is a artificial set of rules and someone picking and roses and who can do what. But football and all of sports, March Madness, it's reality TV. That's why people watch it.
I think it's a competition. Like competition loses something with timeliness. Like if you're not in the competition live or not part of it in the moment, it loses something. So you have to watch it every week. You have to be there when it's all going on, or you lose that aspect of the competitiveness of it. It feels like it's already something that's been decided, and now you're just tuning in later. It's not the same.
To see Oral Roberts, make the Sweet 16, right? Anyways, I know this is a very busy time of year for you. I really appreciate it. And yes, if you don't mind, I will hit you up for the top draft injury stuff. And honestly, if you want to give me the ones to help you, I'll give you the information from what I see and try and research a little bit. But I really appreciate your taking the time and hopping on Pro Football Doc Podcast. Normally, we invite you to stay on the second half and be the guest co-host here, but I know you're too busy for that, so I appreciate it. So anything else you want to say, Push, or anything before we take a quick break here?
I guess we got a draft guide coming out next Monday, the final version at PFF. You guys want to go get that, get it with any subscription. And we're going to have you on our podcast, Doc, to go. I'll give you that list of names. It'll come on and break them down for us, because there are a few guys in the first round here that have some serious injury red flags that I'm going to need some more info on.
Well, I'd be happy to. And the only thing I would ask is you can ask me anything you want about NFL injuries, and I don't need a cheat sheet on what to do. But for college, I do, because I watch so much sports that it's all NFL. I actually don't watch a lot of college, and that's just a compromise for my family and wife. So I do need the primer to go research and look at film and figure that out. So anyways, thank you, Mike Renner, Pro Football Focus. Thanks for being on the Pro Football Doc Podcast. We'll take a quick break and let Mike go, and we'll come back and continue.